Hello everyone, welcome to the Economy Primer series of Drishti IAS. I am Ritu and today we are going to discuss very important topic of GS3, which is economics of war. So before moving to the points of discussion, you already know that Economy Primer is a new initiative of Drishti IAS in which we deal with the economy topics and we take inspiration from the recent topics and we go into details about that topic. So moving to the today's topic, which is the economics of war. So why we have chosen this topic? You already know that there are lots of war going on around the world. We have this Israel-Palestinian war, we have this Russia-Ukraine war, and there are so many indirect wars between US and China. So because of this thing, we have taken this topic, that what is the economic impact of all these wars on the global economy. So moving to the points of discussion part. So first of all, we are going to discuss that why this is into the discussion, and then a brief background about the wars, and then impacts in both ways. It means that we are going to discuss this thing in a positive way also and also in a negative way, and then case studies of recent wars, and then how it impacts India, and after that we will go through the conclusion and then practice question for prelims and mains. So moving to the discussion part, so we have taken few cutouts from the newspaper. The first cutout is that war in Ukraine at 1 year, pain resilience in global economy, war, the effect on economic growth, Russian invasion of Ukraine impedes post-pandemic economic recovery in emerging Europe and Central Asia. And we have recently this wider war in Middle East could tip the world economy into the recession. So these are the news we have taken, and with the help of all these news, we are going to discuss today's topic, that how war is impacting the global economy. And we'll have a case study of Russia, Ukraine also, and we'll have case study of Israel, Palestine, and how it is particularly impacting our country. We are also going to discuss in today's lecture. So moving to the background part. So, this is not the first time that war is happening on and around the world. We have the long history of wars. So first of all, we have this World War I and World War II. So after these two wars, United Nations had been formulated, World Bank had been formulated, IMF had been formulated to make world peace, and also to look for the economic condition of war-torn countries, especially the developing countries and least developed countries. So because of all these wars, we have taken such kind of the steps so that the economy of all those countries could be recovered, because in World War I also and World War II also, various of the countries, especially the least developed countries, African countries and Asian countries, were colonized by the colonial powers. So they don't have any independent economy. So in order to establish their independent economy, we had formulated such kind of the things. But the story did not stop there. After the 1945, we have this World War, and then we have this Cold War. And why we have this Cold War? Then we have looked at, what is this Cold War? So the Cold War is a clash between two nations, which is first is the Soviet bloc and second is the American bloc. So what happened in this Cold War? So here there is no direct armed conflict, but there is a lots of political hostility, weapon wars, and propaganda, political problems. So because of all this political problem, hostility, we have this kind of the war. And because of all these kind of condition, the world is divided into two blocks. The first block is the Soviet bloc and the second block is the Western bloc, and the world divided into the East versus West rivalry. And because of this East versus West rivalry, we have this kind of the problem, and all the developing countries had to take sides, that whether they are a part of the East bloc or whether they are part of the Western bloc. But in this situation, India chose to remain independent, though it has recently got independence, but still India chose to remain neutral, and it had not joined any aligned party or any blocs. So it has another kind of repercussion. Because of this, India did not choose any of the economy, and India did not join any of the bloc, and because of all these things, India had to face repercussion. And what kind of repercussion it had to face? The first repercussion is that India became a closed economy, and because of closed economy, it could not exchange economic knowledge to other worlds, and it could not also grab economic knowledge from the other parts of the country. So these are the drawbacks of becoming a closed economy. But other economy had to also suffer, because they are a part of particular block, so they could not align with the other blocks, and because of that also their economic opportunities are very limited. So in that way, the economic opportunities are so much compromised. So this was the era of Cold War. And after the dissolution of Soviet Union, people thought that, war had been decreased and there will be the no wars on the obsolete basis. But the story did not stop here, and we have the number of the wars had decreased, but we have the wars in the steady speed, and the nature of the war has been changed. Earlier in Cold War, we had this political hostility, political propaganda. So, but this time we have this ethno-religious war, and now the world is divided on the basis of ethnic identity and the religious identity. And because of the ethnic identity and religious identity, people are taking sides that, okay, we belong to this kind of religious community, we belong to this kind of ethnic community. So they are taking sides on the basis of their identity, not on the basis of economic opportunity. So these are the drawbacks of the war, which limited the scope of the economy and which has shrunken the world economy and the global economy. So we'll have a brief look about the background of the war. That this is a graph in which we can see that, the war has been started since 1946 to 1990. So what we have seen that, there was a surge in the armed conflict between these 2 years. But after that, it has decreased. But if we will draw this map right now, this thing will increase, because we can see the armed conflict between Russia and Ukraine, and also Israel and Palestine. So many people are dying. There is a bombing between these two countries. So, but this was the situation. We are here looking for the background, that what is the history of the armed conflict and how it had impacted the economy. So this is the history. Moving to that, what kind of the wars we had witnessed. So we had a different kind of wars all over the world. So coming to the Cold War period, we have this Soviet invasion on the Hungary in 1956 and Czechoslovakia in 1968. And in the Asia also, we had witnessed various kind of wars, like Chinese invasion of Tibet in 1950, Cultural Revolution from 1966 to 76. In Africa also, so many countries had fought for their independence, their freedom struggle. And in Angola, the War of Independence lasted from 1961 to 1974. And what happened, that after Cold War era, the number of wars has been stricken from 49 to 24. But right now we are also moving towards the war kind of situation, where this number may be increased, and we don't have this direct kind of war, but we still have this political hostility, political propaganda kind of war. And now the nuclear weapons are also becoming the part of the war, which is costing so much economic on the whole world economy. So moving to the next slide. Next slide is about that, what are the impacts of the war. So I already have told you that we are going to analyze this lecture not on a single basis. We are going to analyze this lecture on two bases. So the first basis is what are the negative impacts of the war. So the first negative impact is a geopolitical ramification. So as you already know that there is a political hostility between two countries such as Russia and Ukraine, Israel and Palestine. So there will be the geopolitical ramification in which they will start investing on the defense expenditure. So what happened, that they will expend on defense expenditure, so they will not spend on the required things. So this is the geopolitical ramification. The second is the global food crisis. So suppose that if we are taking example of Russia and Ukraine, so these both countries are known as a breakfast land, and they supply around 50% of their food resources to the African countries. So in that way, the Africa is suffering from the food crisis. And it's not just Africa, the Asian countries are also suffering from the food crisis. European countries are also suffering from the food crisis, because they are one of the largest producer of the wheat, sunflower oil. So because of this, there is a food crisis in all over the world. And then energy challenges. So they are the countries who are also the largest producer of the natural oil and gases. And because of that, so many countries are taking benefit from that. But when there was a war, the natural prices of the natural gas and the oil surged by 120 to 130%, which is very huge in number. So it is economic costing to all over the world. And the fourth is demand and supply chain affected. So because of the war, so many bridges had been stopped, so many maritime trade had been stopped. There was a stoppage between various maritime trade, and so many land routes were also stopped. So because of that, also supply chain had been disrupted, and it is costing high on the African countries and Asian countries. So these are the demand and supply chain, and America is also getting affected because of that, because they could not export metal from the Russia, and Russia has been imposed around 2400 of sanctions. So these kind of sanctions has been imposed on Russia, which will ultimately in long term it will hurt the Russian economy. So coming to the positive impact, so here there is a positive impact. The first is the rise in self-sufficient economy. So that what is rise in the self-sufficient economy? So the first thing is that when we are dependent on various countries for our breakfast, for our various grain resources, for our the metal resources, for the technological support, but all those countries who are involved in the war, then we don't have any options. So people start innovating and they become self-sufficient economy. So many countries, especially India and other African countries who are dependent on the Russia and Ukraine for various products, so they will start looking for other alternatives and they try to become a self-sufficient economy. And India has also started this Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan, you already know. And then coming to the second point, which is increase in the weapon economy. So we already know that the country will start spending on the defense expenditure. So there will be the increase in weapon economy. So suppose that if Israel and Palestine are in the war, then US will be benefited with this weapon economy, because they will ask weapon and they will purchase weapon from the US and various other countries. So in that way the weapon industry will get benefited. And then increase in pharmacy products. So because of the war, so many people are dying, so many people are injured, and there were so many medical problems happening in war-torn countries. So there is a high demand of pharmacy products. So this industry will also increase, and the countries who are producing pharmacy products in large number, they will get benefited from this thing. So these are the positive and negative impact of the war. So moving to the next slide is about that what are the case studies of recent wars. So we already know that we have two major wars which are going into this whole world. First is the Russia-Ukraine war and second is the Israel-Palestinian war. So the first is that energy and commodities market. So Russia and Ukraine are the largest producer of the energy. So how it is affecting that? It is the second largest natural gas producer and among the top 5 producer of steel, nickel and aluminum. So it is affecting the natural gas also, and it is also affecting the steel, nickel and aluminum. And it consists that 20% of the global trade. So this has been highly impacted because of this thing. And coming to that, what is the Ukraine side in it? That Ukraine is a key producer of corn, 6th largest, and wheat 7th, and sunflowers. So for sunflower, so many people had to depend on the oils which are not good for their health, which are not good for the environment. So in this way they are costing on the economy. Coming to the automatic, transport and chemical sector, so they have also become so much vulnerable because of this war, and they are the producer of cobalt, lithium and magnesium, which is highly affected because of this war. And coming to that, because of all these war, the 40% of Ukrainian agriculture is hardly affected. And in what way it is highly affected? Because the plants are not planted in the fields and it is unharvested. So the 40 to 50% of the agriculture of the Ukraine economy is affected, which is costing all over the global economy. So coming to the next sector, that what are the next sector? So there is a global forecast whose name is COFAS. And what it has forecasted that the world will recover and world will see the forecast of minus 7.5%. So in that way we can see that our growth has become in the minus, and how it is impacting all over the world. And coming to the European economies are at the high risk. So it is not just costing the developing economies or least developed economies. European economies also are at high risk, because they produce so much of the food products from the Russia and Ukraine and oil from the Middle East, and because of that thing they are at the very high risk, and so no reason will be spared by the imported inflation. So because of all these things, so many countries are dependent on the imports and exports on the Russia and Ukraine, and because of all these things there is a recession in the whole global economy. So this is the another kind of the problem which is happening. Coming to the next slide is about that Israel-Palestinian war. So this is a new kind of the war. It has a long history, but right now on October 7th we are witnessing such kind of the war. And what the World Bank had predicted regarding this, that the World Bank had predicted that will give a global economic shock to the whole world, and it because the oil prices has been increased from $150 barrel, and during Russia Ukraine war it was $139. So from 139 to $1.50 it has increased. So you can see that this price is already in a high position, and right now we have this $150 barrel, and because of this it will have a huge impact on the commodity prices. So because of this the transportation cost will increase, and because of the transportation cost the commodity prices will increase, which will ultimately impact the Middle East economies and the Asian economies. So in that way Israel-Palestinian war is not just limited to the Middle East, it is also impacting the whole world. So moving to the next slide is about that what the particular impacts it has held on the India. So India is a country which has a very friendly terms with Russia, Ukraine, and also with the Israel and Palestine, and these all four countries are involved in the war. So how it is impacting India? So we can see that India's growth communication system has been impacted, and how it has impacted, because it has costed in the submarine communication. So India was highly dependent with the Ukraine because of this thing. So its communication system the cost of the communication has been increased, and it has also increased in a various way because India's pharmacy products are very much popular in Russia and Ukraine, and because of all these wars India could not supply its pharmacy products, and because of that thing also the pharmacy industrialists and pharmacy business people are so much affected because of the stoppage of various bridges, various land routes, rail routes, and the sea routes, and because of all these things the pharmacy industry of India is highly impacted. And there are so many stoppage of various good projects because India had planned various good projects with the Russians. Suppose that India had planned to build a natural gas pipeline between India and Russia, and because of the war this project has been stalled. So moving to the next slide, that what it has been impacted from the Israel-Palestinian war. So in these particular sector India had been impacted. So the first particular sector is the export. So India's export to Israel, primarily petroleum products, account to 1.8% of the India's total merchandise. So in that way it is impacting India's export system. Coming to the import, so India import various precious stones such as pearls, diamonds, and other semi-precious stones from the Israel, and so in that way it is also impacting its import, and if you could not import you cannot sell all these products in your economy. So this is also impacting the export and import area. And how it can have a currency impact. So maybe the rupee will depreciate because of all these kind of the problem, because of the low economic condition in the country. And then Indian stock market. So initially India has not witnessed much below the Indian stock market, but RBI and so many experts had predicted that might be it can lower down. So that will also have another set of impact on the Indian economy. And then coming to the equity market, so investors are wary about their investing in other countries, so they are promoting the safe havens assets. So in that way the equity markets are also compromised and they are also getting affected. So these are the impacts we have on India. Moving to the next slide is about conclusion. So we already know that from all these wars the world has taken the financial lessons, and they had taken the macroeconomic lessons that any country can go into the any kind of the war. So you need to be self-sufficient, and you not to dependent on the other's country. I know this is a globalized world, and we are living in a globalized world where we exchange different kind of knowledge to everyone, and we are exchanging our products with everyone. We are trading, and we are also settling the open trade investment, and so many things we are doing. But on the other hand, we should not ignore the fact that political hostility in the world is rising day by day. The terrorism is rising day by day, and so many people are fighting over the ethnic religious identity, and all these are costing on the economic basis. The agriculture is compromised, the manufacturing units are compromised. So the country needs to be self-sufficient, and there should be no promotion of such kind of the things. So there may be a question that what UN is doing in this regard. So UN has imposed so many sanctions on the Russia, and so many Western blocs has imposed sanction on the Russia, and they are also trying to impose on the Israel. because they are bombing the Gaza, they are also de-associating themselves with the Palestinians. So these are the lessons which all the world organization are giving to all these countries who are affected by the war, who are involved in the war. But they are not proving very majorly. Why they are not proving majorly? Because they are not taking a particular stand. And in this situation, you have to take a stand that we have to make a peace dialogue, because these are impacting our economy and people are dying because of the hunger, because of the malnutrition, because of the poverty. And the economy of the world is already declined because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And we already had witnessed a huge pandemic all over the world. And at this time, we could not afford this kind of the war on which so many economies are dependent, especially on the Russia and Ukraine. So in that sense, this war needs to be stopped and there should be the peace settlement between both countries. So moving to that, what is the current scenario of the growth? So this is the latest World Economic Outlook and it has been projected by the IMF. So there is a one column. In that column, here there is a list of advanced economies. So what this trend is showing that, whatever the growth rate we have, it is declining in nature. Suppose that if you look for the United Kingdom, earlier in 2021 it was 7.4, now it has become 3.2, and 2023 it will become 0.5, which is a very worrisome situation coming to the United States, on which so many economies are dependent. So what happened that earlier in 2021 it is 5.7, then it has become 2.3, and then it has become 1.0, which is also another kind of alarmist situation for all over the world. When we look for the India, so this India comes under the emerging and developing economies. So India's growth rate was 8.7, then it has become 7.4, and then it had become 6.1. So India's growth rate is not much worrisome in situation, but we have seen that it is also declining in nature because of all these wars. But unlike the advanced economies, India's condition is much better. And why India's condition is much better? Because India had taken lessons from the COVID-19 pandemic and it had implemented strict policies which can recover its economy, and it is very responded towards the economic situation, towards the economic obstacles, and it had improved its fiscal policies which suits the demands of the India. So in that way, India's economy is not much affected, but it is also in a declining condition. So here we will look for the inflation up. So in both the diagrams, we can see that how inflation is rising day by day, and here it is a graph of the advanced economy. So it is rising day by day, and here we have this emerging market and developing economies. So it is also a worrisome situation. So but when we will analyze that who are the most affected by all these things, so here with this data we can see that advanced economies are most affected by it, and in fact the emerging economies are developing at their fast pace, and India has become the 5th largest economy of the world. So in that sense, they had this dilapidated condition. So these kind of the problems are emerging all over the world, and if advanced economies will collapse, then it will also have an huge impact on the developing economies, because in this globalized world everything is connected, and if one country's economy is declining, the other countries is also affected. So there is a need to make a peace settlement between all those countries, and to also look for the economy, and the IMF, World Bank and other organizations need to take a solitary stand, and they had to be in a solidarity with especially with the war-torn countries, and they had to put so many sanctions and so many other strict measures so that war could be stopped, and so that people could not die because of the hunger and malnutrition. They had initiated various humanitarian measures in order to feed people, but that humanitarian measures are not enough, and that would not do economic justice with all those people. So moving to the next slide. Next slide is about the question. So consider the following statement regarding the safe haven asset. So we already had discussed that there is a surge of safe haven assets. So the first statement is a safe haven asset is a financial instrument that is expected to retain or even gain value during periods of economic downturn. And the second statement is they could appreciate in the event of market crash. So here they are asking the correct statement. So you have to answer in the comment section. Moving to the mains part. So what is the mains question? So the question is, what is war economy and how it can change the global economy? So first you need to define that what is war economy. So the production and distribution which happened in the war-torn countries and the countries who are involved in the war, that is called as a war economy. And here the nature of the economy changes. So earlier we have a different kind of policy. We have, suppose that if you have a policy and if you have budget allocation, suppose that if you are investing this much of education, this much on health, and this much on defense, and this much on security. So now the turn will change, and here people start investing on defense, security, technology. So instead of investing on health, education and social issues, they started investing on such things. So the war economy's nature changes. So this is called as the war economy, and how it can change the global economy. So earlier they used to do innovation and technological production in health area, education area, social issues area, safety area. But right now their turn will be, and their shift towards the war economy, which is defense, security, technology, innovation in equipments development, the technological development, digital infrastructure. And if they will grow for the war economy. So it has capacity to change the global economy in both ways, first in a negative ways and also in the positive way. Suppose that if they will start investing on the weapon economy, medical products, then it will have a long-term impact on the economy, and the medical products will have a positive impact, so that we'll have a new innovations in the medical arena, will have a new kind of technology in the medical arena. But when it comes to the weapon economy, it can be the self-harming, and it can be the destructing for all over the world. So in that way, it can be positive also and it can be negative also. And the country will have this kind of opportunity that they can become self-sufficient in the innovation, in the technology, and whatever they will develop in all over this war kind of area and war time period, that will eventually going to benefit them for the longer time. So in that way, it can be a positive also, and it can be negative also. And at the end, you have to conclude your answer that if you want to develop your economy, but not through the war economy, because war economy can be beneficial in some areas, but in most of the areas it is destructing for the human civilization. So I hope you like this lecture. If you have any queries related to this lecture, kindly ask in the comment section. Thank you.